So this was the incident really that started that. I mean, why do you think your brother, after this had happened, and your father probably didn't react as brutally as you thought he might, he allowed your brother to start to pay it back in some way maybe, but then they go to prison together, and out of whatever, your brother decides to contact the FBI. What do you think was the catalyst that had your brother contact the FBI? Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very blessed on this end. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, and glory and thanksgiving to God for that. Today I want to talk about something that, it was a huge issue in Chicago back in, I think, 2007. It was called the Family Secrets case. A lot of publicity, highly publicized, big media affair. And many of you know who Joey the Clown Lombardo is. I think he was a consigliere of the, family in Chicago at that time. He was one of the people investigated, eventually indicted. Another fellow by the name of Frank Calabrese, who was a maid guy in that family. And was a guy with a very rough reputation. And tonight I'm going to sit down with someone who is very close to that. It was actually Frank Calabrese's son. His name is Kurt Calabrese.
I learned so much from my father how not to treat people. Yeah. And I loved my dad. He wasn't a good person. He wasn't a nice person. He wasn't, he was, and again, what he did to his family. It's hard to say this because people don't understand it, but I never had a problem with what he did because he chose to do that.
Right.
Problem I have is what he did, and you mentioned my uncle. My uncle was like a dad to me. And how he got him involved in that life, my uncle went to him and asked him, he'd like to make some money. My uncle was in the Navy. My uncle was a soldier, mentality of a soldier. And he went to my dad and asked him, I'd like to make some money. Long after that my father brought him to a murder. Didn't tell him what was going on. Didn't tell him where he was going. Told him to meet him somewhere. And he showed up. Now, I have a problem with what my father did to my uncle because, how do you do that to your brother?
And that was his younger brother, right?
It was his younger brother.
It was his younger brother, Nick.
Nick,
Yes.
right. Right. People don't know what happened with my uncle and our family because nobody's out there talking about it. Junior's out there talking about stuff that, he wants to talk about, but, Junior had a plan from day one when he went away. His plan.
This is your brother,
yes.
Frank Jr., yes.
And I refer to him as Junior, and I want you to know that I respect how you feel about what happened, and watching your podcast makes me feel like maybe someday I can sit down with my brother and talk to him, but right now he's dead to me. And I know that's a cliche, but the reason being is because he's not out there talking about what really happened. He's talking about, he's bringing people into the story that don't want to be part of the story. He's brought family members into the story that don't want to be part of the story.
Why do you think he's doing that now?
To make a buck.
Is he selling his story? Is he, getting paid for interviews? Or?
I don't know exactly because we haven't talked in, it's a couple years now, but again, I don't have a problem with somebody trying to make $1 and surviving. My problem is, why not just tell the truth? And people have heard the story, Mike, and said, hey, the truth is a lot more interesting than the lies.
Well, let's explain that for people that are not aware of what happened. There was a big case. I think your father and your brother got arrested for it. And they were sentenced, and they were in Milan, Michigan together in the prison, which, by the way, my dad was there at the same time. And I remember him, again, I wasn't focused on this, but I remember him talking about the guys he met from Chicago, and, they were a good crew, and he mentioned some of the names, but it was a long time ago,
Right.
Then what happened, your brother contacted the FBI. I think he wrote a letter to them and said, I want to cooperate. And, similar situation with my brother. Out of nowhere, it seems, he just got in touch with the FBI and said, I want to cooperate. Your brother wired himself up and started wiring your father, having conversations with your father while they were in prison. Now, and my brother did the same thing. They weren't in prison, but my dad was out on parole. He wired himself up, And boy, all these conversations, not only with my father, but with other people. So we're so similar in that regard, Kurt, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you didn't expect that to happen. When I heard it was my brother was like a bombshell. We never expected it. He just disappeared. Next thing we know, he's in the program. And he had been wiring my father for quite some time, and other people. But let me ask you this. I mean, I read some stuff about it. Do you think your brother was justified in doing that? I heard what he said about it. And basically, you know, my dad is an animal, I'm going to be honest.
Yes.
And he deserves this, and he should be put away forever, and that's why your brother did it. How do you feel about that? Was that honest?
It was honest about how my father was, but there's a lot of contradictions in the story when he talks about why he did it. You know, he had a different kind of relationship with my father. My father wasn't as hands-on with him. There was a situation with my brother. My father had me hiding money in safety deposit boxes, putting money in safety deposit boxes, a lot of money. The curse that I had was my father trusted me. And I think he trusted me because he knew I was deathly afraid of him. So the bullying is what really scared me into, you know, never saying no to him. You know, the abuse and the bullying. And so
Let me ask you this. How did you feel about, you knew it was criminal activity. How did you feel about it, about doing that for your dad? I mean, did it bother you at all?
It bothered me when, what happened was, it bothered me, I was being followed, we were being watched a lot, and him asking me to do that, or telling me to do that. What I didn't like was, I was bringing money there, putting it in the boxes. He would basically strap the money to me in envelopes, the manila envelopes, the long manila envelopes, and he would, the money was in the envelopes. I wasn't supposed to know that the money was in there, yet I helped him put the money in the envelopes. So I don't know what my father was thinking at that point, and I didn't care. But what happened was I was going to the banks, and I knew I was being followed, and I wanted to be careful, because I knew that if I got pulled over with that money, I wasn't going to tell them anything.
Right.
But they were going to take the money, right? So I went back to my dad the one day, and I said, Dad, I said, you know, I got to ask you a question. I'm a little concerned about bringing this money. I said, because, you know, I'm careful, but I'm not, you know, anybody can make a mistake.
Sure.
I said, so what do I tell them if I get pulled over with this money on them? What do I tell them? And his answer to me was, don't get pulled over.
Yeah.
And I never went back to the bank, Mike, because at that point I knew that the money was important and I wasn't.
Right.
And I would have went to jail for that. I'd have died for that. But him telling me that, I never went back to the bank, and I started putting the money. I started putting the money in the hockey bag in our house, the envelopes with the money, and it got so full that I couldn't pick the hockey bag up. So I stopped taking the money to the bank. I filled up the hockey bag, had to drag it out of the house into the garage and up the stairs in the garage, because our house was wired, but the garage was wired too, or alarmed. I mean, not wired, alarmed. I don't know how much time went by, but I went to look for the money was gone. Now, I only told one person where that money was, and that was my brother. So the story he talks about...
Was that like the 600,000?
Yeah, it wasn't 600,000 though, Mike. It was closer to anywhere between $1.5 million and $2 million.
Because the story is, to explain to people, it came out later that the reason your brother might have wired himself up against your father because he stole the money, and he was afraid if your father knew, it would be all over for him. So to protect himself, he went after your dad. That's the story out there. I don't know if there's truth to it, but maybe
no, there's definite
clear it
truth to
up.
that. The unfortunate thing is there's never been truth to how much money was there and where he got it from. And I don't know why he wouldn't tell the truth on the fact that he stole that money. And he put me in a lot of problems. That you know.
Well, what happened when your father found out about it?
Well, what happened was every day I had to meet my father sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, and sit with him. And every time we'd sit together, he'd take out a piece of paper and a pencil, and he'd start writing down numbers. And he said, I heard your brother did this, I heard your brother did that. And he's spending money. And he's going to Vegas, and he's picking up checks, and he's taking groups of people to Vegas with him. Where's he getting this money? Now, at that time, my father had nothing to do with my brother. He didn't trust my brother. He chased him, and he didn't need him because he had me and he had my uncle. So we picked up more of the slack, and he chased my brother. So when my father decided, he must have been thinking about it, because he came to my house at like 5 in the morning, rang the doorbell, told me, come on, we're going to the bank to get the money, to get get all the money out. And I told him, I said, Dad, money's not there. He said, what do you mean it's not there? He said, your brother took it, didn't he? I said, Dad, I'm only going to tell you what he told me. He swore on his kids' lives that he didn't touch that money. My father took that as me defending my brother. My uncle took that as me defending my brother. All I said was, hey, I asked him. He told me, did I believe him? No, but he swore on his kids. I said, I don't know where you draw the line with somebody if they're, you swear on your kids. Mm-hmm. So that day, we walked to his house, my brother's house, which was about 2 blocks away from me. And we walked to his house, knocked on the door. My brother came out. My father said, where's the money? Brother said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't touch it. My father gave him a crack. He fell down. He cried. And he said, Dad, I took it. I'm sorry.
He admitted it.
Admitted it.
Wow.
But my father, at that point, I thought my father was going to lose it. My father looked at me and he said, see, stupid, I told you he took the money. And
it's a crazy reaction.
And that was before he asked him, where's the rest of the money?
Yeah.
He said, it's all gone. He said, it's all gone. And my father was so surprised by it happening that he told them that that money didn't belong to him. That money belonged to other men. And that if he didn't get it back, they were going to come looking for my brother, which we knew wasn't true. We knew it was his money. But that's the way he liked to, for whatever reason, portray it.
So
but
how did he discipline, retaliate? What did he do against your brother at that point?
He didn't do what everybody thought he would do. He didn't do what I thought he would do. And, I didn't want him to. I didn't want, again, ideally I wish this could have just blown over. But he blamed me for losing that money. And he was right, because I was responsible for that. Whether I liked him or agreed with him, as a man, I was responsible for that money. And I made the mistake of trusting my brother. But I never thought that my brother would put me in that spot. I mean, he talks about all about how he was scared. And, if somebody was scared, they would have been scared of that, because money was my dad's God. You take his money, he's done a lot more serious things, not over money. Taking his money from him, I thought he was going to hurt both of us. I really did. And I was scared for my life.
And what happened? How did he react afterwards?
He reacted where he told my brother, I took my brother's car. He said, you're going to start paying off the money. You're going to start paying me back the money. My brother took some of that money, invested it in 2 restaurants. He made me go down to work the one restaurant, because he threw my brother out. Get out, get away, don't come around here no more. So I had to go down, and at the time I was working 2 and 3 jobs, plus I was on the street for him 10 hours a day. So
you had a legitimate job also?
Yeah.
Doing what?
I was a BA for the union. And
now, did your dad get you that job?
No, actually, my mother's brother, my Uncle Ed, was the president of the International. So when I wasn't working, I asked my mom, can you go see if Uncle Ed can get me a job? And she went to him, and he put me to work. And he was a very, very powerful man, my uncle, very well-respected man, but he also knew what kind of person my father was. In fact, so much so that he told me one time when we were talking, he said, why don't you leave? Why don't you get out of Chicago, get away from your dad? Because if you stay here, you're going to end up in trouble. And he said to me, go to Vegas, work for the local in Vegas, and at some point, maybe it'll become yours. I couldn't leave at the time because I had just gotten married, and my wife at the time has a son, my stepson, and I wasn't going to leave him here because we couldn't take him. So I was able to do that, I would have probably left, especially if I had a job waiting for me. And my uncle was a great guy, and I've got a problem because now Junior's out talking about my Uncle Ed. He's talking about both sides of the family now.
Well, let me ask you, this is really interesting, and it's important because it was this incident maybe that kind of led up to your brother eventually recording your father's conversations, getting him to admit its public murders and everything else. And that's what led up to that huge secret, was it Operation Secret?
Family Secrets.
Family Secret trial,
Secrets,
yes. In which I think there were 5 guys indicted at that time, including Lombardo.
Yeah, I think there was more than 5, but close.
I think there was 5 that went to trial. A bunch of guys took a
Right,
plea, if
right.
I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And your brother initiated that by recording your dad and getting this whole trial started. So this was the incident really that started that. I mean, why do you think your brother, after this had happened, and your father, I mean, he probably didn't react as brutally as you thought he might. He allowed your brother to start to pay it back in some way, maybe. But then they go to prison together, and out of whatever, your brother decides to contact the FBI. What do you think was the catalyst that had your brother contact the FBI?
At that time, my brother's house was in foreclosure. And again, we were away, so I was getting.
How much time did your brother have at that time? Do you know, what was his sentence?
He got 30-some months he got.
Okay. So do you think he did it to get out of jail, or there was a bigger motive? I mean, 30 months is
No, it's not.
not enough to make somebody cooperate normally.
Right.
Normally.
Well, and have somebody reach out to the FBI means usually
Yes.
they're bothering you, right? They're coming knocking on your
Yes.
door wanting you to. What happened was his house was in foreclosure. So my father said he was going to give him some money, his wife money, so that they can stay there until the house can be sold, and then they're on their own. But he also told him, when he sells that house, I want my money back. And this is after he stole $1.5 million, $2 million from my dad. Okay, so he had nothing left, none of that money left. Didn't pay his house. Didn't. So my father, I had heard, was told by, like I said, I think it was my mother, that, and my brother wasn't happy about that. He was sitting in prison, as I was, and wasn't happy that my father wasn't wanting the money back from selling the house. And so I believe at that time is when he decided to do that. But he had made comments to me. We were sitting in a restaurant one day, eating, and it was my brother, my dad, and myself. And my dad, we were sitting there, and this is how my dad was. We were, he would just throw something out there just to see how you reacted. And so we were sitting there, and my dad said to us, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he had asked me, what would I do if my kids ever decided to cooperate against me? And I told him my kids don't know anything that could hurt me. Well, I took offense to that because of the way it was presented to me. It was like, I'm questioning you whether you would cooperate.
Right.
But he didn't say it that way. He put it in that style of how he always put things. My brother, we were sitting there eating, and my brother didn't even acknowledge him. He didn't even hear him. He had his head down. He was eating his food. I kicked him. And I was like, are you listening to this? Because it's offensive to me. I don't know anything that could hurt you. Really? I mean, come on, at that point. Yeah. But, again, I didn't say anything. And when we were driving home, I looked at my brother and I said, did you hear what he said? He's like, I don't pay any attention to him. I'm like, so
that's
the way it played
it.
out was, how it all played out was almost like my father said it. And
Kurt, this is so interesting to me because, I have said to people more than dozens of times, both in person at engagements that I had and here on YouTube, that the mob life, the mafia life, are evil lifestyles because the families are destroyed, dysfunctional. We have to say, look, I came from a dysfunctional family. I think you can relate to that.
Yes. And
it's basically because of our fathers. And, one of the reasons I walked away from the life is because I didn't want my family to go through the same thing. I had a young girl. I was marrying her. I said, am I going to bring her into this mess? And people don't understand that. They oh, you're a snitch and you're a rat. And they don't understand, how devastating this lifestyle could be. I mean, look what it's done to you.
Yeah.
I mean, your brother, regardless, my brother, the same thing. I was very upset with my brother for a long time when I found out what he did. But then years later, when he sat down with me and he tried to explain, he said, Michael, you don't understand what we went through. He said, I don't know how you dealt with it. But, my sister couldn't deal with it. She died of an overdose of cocaine. My younger sister was half a basket case. She was never functionally, emotionally present. And she ends up dying at 42 years old because she smoked herself to death. She was a wreck. I mean, if you saw her, you would say, what's with this kid? My mother, a basket case, 33 years without a husband. She died. Her relationship with my dad, ugly near the end. And so many families that I know of guys in that life, same thing. A little bit different variations, but the same thing because the families are so dysfunctional. And I want to be clear. I don't call all the guys evil guys. I'm not saying that. I was one of them. Right. And I happen to be very fortunate, very blessed. But there was some that were, look, your dad was a rough guy. I mean, I hear brutal things. I don't know him personally. I'm only knowing what I read. I don't believe everything that I read. My dad, according to the FBI, he murdered 30 or 40 people. I don't know how true. He never talked about it until he got caught on tape saying that he murdered a lot of people, which in his old age, he got a little bit careless. So, and then other guys weren't like that, but I don't know. When I hear this, I guess it gets to me, Kurt, because I can totally relate to what you've been through, and even with your brother, and I know now you have a tough relationship with your brother, right?
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, but the last straw with my brother was, I dropped my guard and told him something that, in confidence. After everything that's happened, I kind of thought, we're gonna be able to work out our differences and move forward.
Now, how long ago was this? This was well after he testified?
Oh, yeah. It actually wasn't that long ago.
Recently?
It was probably about 2.5, 3 years ago.
Is he in the program or is he out
No.
of the program? He's out of it now.
I don't believe he is. I don't believe he's in the program, but honestly, I don't know the truth because I've been told so many different things that
Well, let me tell you, from what
contradict.
I know, normally their policy is you can stay in the program for 5 years, from what I understand. I hear you can extend that a little bit. I think my brother extended it a little bit, but they don't keep you in there for the rest of your life. I know that. So this was a long time ago. I would assume your brother's out of the program, wherever he is, but so you're able to talk to him. Yes.
Yeah, and so when he came home and told me what he did, I didn't believe him because I just couldn't believe it. First of all, I couldn't believe he did it. Second of all, I couldn't believe that what he told me my father told him, I didn't believe him. My father never talked about murders. My father never talked about, when you talked about how your dad told you, when he talks about something, the next, it's gone. Okay,
It's gone.
that's how my father.
He was the same way.
Yeah. And, my father drove us crazy in our lives, being careful. I mean, not talking on phones, to the point that he drove you crazy. But you know why now that he was the way he was. He was living here at the time.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were living in the same house. We were all living with my mom. I told him who killed Sam Giancana. And I told him that he could not tell that to anybody. He could not go any further than me telling him. And I probably shouldn't have repeated it. And I should have known better because I lived my whole life that way. But I don't know what made me tell my brother that, but I just felt like trying to get that bond back that we had years and years ago when we were kids. And he turned around and went right to the news and did a story on it and tried to pass it off as my father telling him that, because he definitely didn't want to say it came from me, or had my father told him that, it would have been in the book. Okay.
Yeah.
And the lying about it, it's offensive to me because, like I said, I told him something in confidence.
Right.
But that just shows you that the bond that we had we'll never have, because I can't trust him. Again, as much as I felt about my dad, I would have never did that to my father.
So did you kind of resent that, not like what your brother did?
I did, and I said I can't trust him. I can't talk to him about it, anything. He'll exploit it in some ways, like my father would have done it. He exploited things to make a buck. Our bond that I had with my family, I would have done anything for my family. I would have died for my family, and it's contradictory to me to talk like that if I feel the way I feel. But I would have, and I would have died for my family, for my father, for my whole family. What really happened and what the story that's out there about what happened, it's never been told. The truth's never been told. And, that's part of why I feel like I have to do this, because I can't, I'm at the point where I have to figure out a way to deal with my life. And I'm not doing such a great job of it.
Well, let me ask you this. How's your uncle doing now? Does he have a relationship with your brother?
No.
So they don't talk either?
No.
Because it sounds like your brother put him in a situation where if it wasn't, your brother started the whole family secrets case.
Right.
It was
There'd
all
be no
him.
case. There would have been no
There would have
case.
been no case at that point. That is, wow, that's deep.
And it's
'Cause
hurt.
he started the case, and it hurt the whole family.
Yeah,
of
and it's
course.
hurt people outside of the family that are friends because of the fact that he brought them in to the story. In other words, tell your story. You have a story, tell your story, but bringing people into it, and there was the reasons why it was done were all wrong all done for the wrong reasons. Why my brother did what he did was for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I'm hoping someday he can take responsibility for that. But I don't know if that'll ever happen, and I'm not banking on it or living my life to try to make it that way anymore.
All right, so there you have it. Kurt Calabrese. Fascinating story to me, how he's come out of this. He had an abusive father. And, a lot of people point fingers at people. They don't really know what the story is. And I always say, until you walk in somebody's shoes, like Kurt, or like my brother, maybe even his brother Frank, it's hard to pass judgment on people. I say this all the time. The mob life, it's an evil, destructive lifestyle because of what it does to the families. Kurt's story is not totally unique. A lot of us went through that. A lot of people went through that who grew up in this whole mob life. And that's why I say it's a bad life, and I discourage people from getting involved in it. But I hope you can relate to it, some of you. I hope none of you have gone through some of the things that he's gone through. But anybody that's gone through that and is able to come out of it and at least, maintain some kind of a lifestyle, you got to give them credit, because it's extremely difficult, take it from me. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. We try to give you the best possible content we can, stories that are realistic. We try to lay it on the line as best as we possibly can. You've all reacted very well to Karen Gravano's story, hopefully the same with Kurt. And that's it. And we'll just keep bringing you good content. We got a lot of things lined up, and hopefully you're going to enjoy it. So get near the end of the year. We got a big year coming up. Trust me, a lot of good things happening for all of you that have been so loyal, and we're going to show our appreciation. So that's it for today. How do I always leave you? Same way. Be safe. We had an election. I don't understand everything, the outcome, but crime is still an issue out there, people. Be safe. Be healthy. Do the best you can to maintain your health. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. God bless every one of you. Be safe. Be healthy. God bless. Yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.